So we're currently living in a nightmare in the United States. Not only are we the epicenter of a deadly, out of control global pandemic, but the government has decided months ago that they're just going to give up on even pretending to try to contain this raging virus that's led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in this country, millions infected. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, the government has been lying about the virus since it started. Just about every single thing related to this virus, the government's lied about at some point. There's this infamous recording of Trump back in February this year, before the lockdowns, before the public knew what was going on. He was saying, "Oh no, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it." But he told Bob Woodward in an interview that was recorded, he said, "Yeah, this is going to be really bad. It's very dangerous. It's very contagious, and it's very deadly. There are going to be a lot of people who die from this." That's not what they told the public. It's months later, Donald Trump was still pretending that the virus was no big deal. Up until that tape was released, I think it was October or September, Dr. Fauci lied about the effectiveness of masks. He admitted this. I'm not saying this. He said it. He said he lied about the effectiveness of masks because they were afraid that if people went out and bought masks, there would be a shortage and the doctors and the nurses wouldn't have enough. That's his words, not mine. So they lied about that too. I forget exactly what month it was, but at some point, Donald Trump just told the CDC to stop publishing information about COVID, and all the numbers and the data that they release have to come through the White House. They have to be approved from the White House. And this is basically a way of them trying to manipulate the numbers to make it sound like it's not as bad as it actually was. And this isn't even half the instances of the government lying about this virus. So I never really understood why people are taking the CDC's numbers that they're releasing as gospel. They release a number and they say, 2,100 deaths today. I guess that's the deaths, and everybody just basically repeats it as if it's fact. The reality is the government has been lying about the numbers from the beginning, trying to downplay the actual numbers. So who knows how many people are infected, and who knows how many people have actually died from this. I wouldn't be surprised if twice as many people have died from COVID as the official numbers report. If you don't think that the government would lie about the deaths of their own citizens due to their failure to contain the virus, then you're incredibly naive. Our own government, this very same government, lies about the deaths of civilians, innocent civilians we kill when we drop bombs in another country. We on purpose lie about it to manipulate the public so that they aren't as outraged about the war when they see an incredibly high death toll. I'm not making this up. People at the highest level of our government, generals, commanders, people working at the Pentagon, people working in the White House, they've admitted that this is their strategy to lie about civilian casualties, to manipulate the public, to manipulate public opinion. Why wouldn't they do that to cover their own ass when they have failed in the most epic way to contain this virus? We have the worst, we're the worst hit country in the entire world. So it is only logical that they will lie to try to downplay how bad and severe what is going on actually is. So this brings me to the topic of this video. So Rebecca Jones was a scientist at the Florida Department of Health back when the pandemic started, and she was helping calculate the infection numbers and the death rate and things like that for the state. And at one time, they came to her and told her to manipulate the data to downplay what the numbers actually were, and she refused to do it, so she left. And since she left, she's been doing calculating the numbers on her own and publishing them every single day for a more accurate number of the COVID cases in Florida. And also she started calculating the amount of cases that were the amount of infections in schools for the entire country. Well, a day or two ago, she was in her home and the police came in and did a raid and took all her equipment, her computer, her cell phone as evidence in some sort of bullshit claim that there's some data breach, there's some hack at the Department of Health, and they're claiming that Rebecca Jones is responsible for it.
Come outside. Outside.
Who else is in the house, ma'am?
My 2 children and my husband.
Where's your husband at?
Calm down. Calm down.
You want the children down?
Calm them all down.
Mr. Jones, come down the stairs. Now!
Police, come down now.
Search warrant.
Bring your
Come down the
children.
stairs.
My children!
Quinn, hang on, let me clear behind
He
you.
just pointed a gun at my children!
Search warrant.
So I'm going to get into how bullshit the justification for this raid was in more detail in a little bit. But let me just talk about the raid because it was on video. Part of it was on video. And it was the police coming up in there acting like fucking thugs like they normally do. She opened the door. They have a gun drawn and pointed at her. For what reason? I have no idea. She's not accused of some violent crime. She's not armed and dangerous. There's not a warrant saying armed and dangerous for her arrest. They're doing some bullshit investigation about a hack at the Department of Health. Why are your guns drawn? That's the first point. So they come into her house and make her kids and her husband come downstairs. And while they're coming downstairs, the police pointing a gun at her children. A loaded gun. Big, brolic, yelling ass men in their house pointing a loaded gun at them. At children. This is what the police are doing with taxpayer money. So, to be clear, it's not like they were following some type of department policy when they did this. They were doing this to intimidate her, to scare her. That was the point of this entire raid. So as soon as this raid happened, she was on Twitter going off about it, and she was doing research into this alleged investigation. And then you find out that the judge who signed the warrant was literally just made a judge by Ron DeSantis not even a month ago. And this is when his first acts as a judge. And also, he's not even a criminal. He's not a judge in criminal court. He's a judge in civil court. So he would have no business signing a warrant for a criminal case in any other circumstance unless this was directed by Ron DeSantis and carried out by his office. And they're using this guy that they literally just appointed as a judge as a rubber stamp to authorize this abuse of power by raiding this woman's home for absolutely no reason. Another update to the story, because I just looked at her Twitter feed before I started recording this video. Apparently, the website or the data or whatever they're claiming was there was a data breach. Apparently, they have the usernames and the passwords to the accounts that have access to the information that they claim she hacked. All of that is public, is posted on a public website so for anybody to see. So again, it makes this whole claim that this information was hacked by somebody, much less Rebecca Jones, even more. It makes it sound like even more bullshit. Well, let's just call it what it is. This is just rank authoritarianism, police state bullshit. That's what this is. You have a whistleblower saying, hey, the government is lying to us about this deadly pandemic, this deadly virus that is raging through the state. And they're acting like it's not a big deal. We'll hear the real numbers, and it's way worse than they're actually saying it is. And because she had the audacity to call the government out for their bullshit, they're going to use the full force of the state to intimidate her and to scare her and to threaten her into to shutting the fuck up and letting them go about their business. This is a police state. Let's just be clear about that up front. This facade about democracy, get out, you got to go out and vote, it's your right, that's how you influence it. All that is bullshit. Let's talk about the facts, man. What the facts are is we live in a police state, and this isn't just some one-off incident. This is how people in power abuse their power to silence dissent. It happens all the time. This instance with Ron DeSantis sending the police to intimidate a whistleblower, that's the most recent example of it. What do you think they're doing with Julian Assange? This is what they do to truth tellers, people who speak truth to power. Anybody who is adversarial and calls out the government and exposes the government, the people in power use the full force of the government not to go after the criminals. In Julian Assange case, they didn't use the full force of the government to go after the war criminals and to go after the people who are on video murdering innocent civilians and laughing about it. No, they used the full force of the government to go after the person who exposed the war crimes. They used the full force of the government to prosecute the journalists who published this information and to prosecute the whistleblower who exposed this and made this public. That's how our government operates. It looks like we're the bad guy in that scenario. Obama did it during his administration too, when people exposed were exposing the drone program and things like that. He used the full force of the government to prosecute them and to prosecute whistleblowers. So I really need people to grow up and to understand that the idea of this benevolent government that's just looking out for the people and isn't really nefarious, like, that isn't the case. The government is insanely corrupt, and part of the corruption has led to these abuses of power. And it's even worse. They on purpose do false arrests to intimidate people, do raids like this to intimidate people, to keep them from telling the truth, to cover up crimes. They do this shit. Anybody out there should be concerned by this, should be concerned by the lengths that our government, state and federal, will go to prosecute and use the full force of the state to go after somebody just for exposing the crimes of the government. That should worry everybody, because this has a chilling effect on free speech. Even if they don't follow through on this and do some bullshit false arrest and try to bring charges against her, even if they don't do that, just the fact that they did such a aggressive and intimidating raid on somebody is enough to give people pause about calling out the government and criticizing the government, because they think, hey, maybe what's stopping them from doing it to me? What's stopping them from raiding my house? What's stopping them from trying to charge me with some bullshit made up offense? So this is an assault on free speech, and it's meant to send a message to people not to criticize the government, or else this could be you. And that should not be normalized. People should not accept this, because we're walking a very fine line here between, and honestly, I would say we crossed this line into some type of dystopian police state where the government is illegally spying on everybody. They're illegally collecting everybody's emails and phone calls and text messages, internet history. So they know every single thing that you're doing, and they are willing to use that information, and they're willing to do false arrests to intimidate people who are actually just criticizing the government, which is well within everybody's right to do as a citizen in this country. I'm afraid that this is becoming too normalized, that people just accept the government going after whistleblowers and going after people who expose the crime of government. And just because it happens a lot doesn't mean it should be normalized, or else you're just kind of laying back and accepting that we live in a lawless, authoritarian, fascist state. I hope everybody understands how outrageous and unacceptable this is. You can't just have the governor of the state sicken the police on people who are critical of him just because he doesn't like what they're saying. That is fucking insane. Some people are talking about this, but this seems like most of the public's just gonna shrug their shoulders and like, it's the government, this is what they do, bullies and authoritarians and tyrants and, police state, but this is just the way it is, so we have to accept it. We should not be accepting this. This, along with all the other bullshit that's going on, we should not be accepting this. So don't become so used to the abuses of power by the government and the attempt to crack down on free speech. Don't get used to that and just shrug your shoulders when it happens, and when it's in such an extreme, dramatic example like this, where you have the police just busting up in your house, guns drawn, pointing them at your kids, and confiscating your devices for no reason. This is outrageous. So this, and for many other reasons, Ron DeSantis should not continue to be governor. That shouldn't even be an option. Like, this is some Richard Nixon level, sicking your attack dogs on your political enemies type shit. That's what this is. And so the other angle about this that I want to talk about is the policing angle of it. Now, this is what I'm saying. The conversation about how lawless and out of control the police is, it's not limited to one shooting or to a couple shootings or a couple instances of police brutality. The entire institution is corrupt to its core, and no amount of tweaks around the edges and mild neoliberal incremental reforms is going to change that. So when people say abolish the police, it's not, get rid of, we shouldn't have any public safety. They're saying that the current police institution of policing has bred this just unaccountable, violent, militant police state that is terrorizing the communities that they're supposed to be protecting and serving. So what we saw in that video, that's not a one-off. That's not a rare instance of police not only abusing the power, but escalating the situation and being unnecessarily aggressive and threatening people's lives for no reason. That scenario plays out every single day in every single city in this country. It's not always on camera, but this is only the 1 millionth video we've seen this year of police in completely separate instances showing that they're just lawless, and they act like they're above the law, and they act like the law doesn't apply to them, and they act like they can do whatever they want, and no one's allowed to hold them accountable. So when the governor tells you to go raid somebody's house for no goddamn reason, they'd be like, fuck it, why not? And somebody made a great point about this. I can't remember who it was, but this is what we're seeing the police do here. It's the exact same thing that our military does in other countries that we're occupying, where they're unnecessarily aggressive, where they have guns drawn for absolutely no reason, escalating the situation, guns drawn at civilians, threatening their lives for absolutely no reason. They do it on the streets of Iraq and Afghanistan. I've heard stories about how they will just be driving down the street, and if you don't get your car out of the way for whatever the military vehicle is, they will shoot your car just because you did not get out of their way. So trigger happy, have absolutely no value of human life, and people who get off on the power trip. So this is just another example of this militaristic police state that we institute not only here in this country but around the world. People, just because you have a uniform and a gun, they feel like that gives them license to act above the law, act like the law doesn't apply to them, and shit like this is the result, where they're just running up intimidating people's house. What's the difference between them doing this and some fucking cartel and trying to intimidate somebody? Like, there is no difference. They're both acting like thugs, violent thugs, just because they have guns. But this is the current situation in the United States. This is so unacceptable, and there should be a federal investigation into this. Ron DeSantis' ass should be criminally investigated for abuse of power, and he should definitely be forced to resign. There is absolutely no argument anybody can make why Ron DeSantis should still be governor. He shit the bed when it comes to the virus. His response to the economic crisis has been terrible too, and he's actively using the full force of the state to silence anybody who's trying to whistleblow and actually speak truth to power about what's going on with the virus and how the government is lying and being incredibly reckless with the lives of the people, the citizens that they're supposed to be protecting.